Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze, and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Today, we shall discuss another form of drama that is considered to be the best medication for mankind. That is, comedy. So get your pens and notepads ready, cause here we go. Where tragedy is associated with an individual, comedy is a social genre. And that's the reason why there are many people who have again stated a lot of opinions regarding this form of drama, comedy. My personal favorite is by the Irish dramatist George Bernard Shaw, who describes comedy in this quote: by laughter, only can you destroy evil without malice and affirm good fellowship without mawkishness. Such a well stated aspect about comedy. Let us begin with our very first question. Why is comedy important? Is it because it is serving something? What is it serving? This brings us to the very first thing, that is the very function of comedy. Comedy produces laughter, it helps you to attack the social pests and weaknesses of human nature, it allows you to correct the manners of the people who are doing something very, very unethical, maybe something very wrong. It also helps to reshape them by redefining their code of conduct. It also helps in destroying the evil without creating any kind of malice or any kind of social chaos. Last but not the least, it also induces comic catharsis. Hold that thought. How is comic catharsis induced? Remember, the last class that we did on tragedy, we saw that catharsis was an important element that was in the end of the play experienced by the audience in the form of fear and pity. This was necessary because by seeing the violence on stage, they were able to purge their emotions by experiencing fear and pity. So, in a way, the whole presentation had a destructive impact because of which the audience was learning something. However, the comic catharsis is not destructive. In fact, it is constructive because what happens is that the audience are very much able to accept the events that are taking place on stage. So they are doing this by laughing at the follies and weaknesses of the characters on stage. So, laughing represents acceptance of your faults, and this acceptance helps the audience to learn and adapt to a better code of conduct. At the same time, even the character on stage evolves by laughing at his own faults and accepting them. So, this is the kind of mutual bond that the audience and the character share in terms of accepting and modifying themselves into better human beings by inducing comic catharsis. Let's move to our next section, which is the origin of comedy. Just as tragedy, comedy also originated in Greece. And this form of drama is also associated with the fertility rites and the worship of the god Dionysus. These Greek comedies or Athenian comedies can be classified into three periods. The initial half is called the Old Comedy, the middle period is often called the Middle Comedy, and the latter period is called the New Comedy. Each period has been popularized by the works of a famous dramatist of that time. For instance, the Old Comedy is known by the works of Aristophanes, the Middle Comedy is known by the works of Aeneas, and the New Comedy is known by the works of Menander. Let us understand the characteristic feature of each period, starting with the Old Comedy. The first characteristic feature of Old Comedy was dance. Dance was a ritualistic art form to honor the gods. The second was lyrical verse. Lyrical verse was important because it was again the music that was generated. It actually added a mood of festivity and dancing, which is the reason why this musical effect was very much important. The next thing was clowning. Now, this characteristic is very interesting because with the help of clowning or buffoonery, you could attack the prominent figures of the time. Aristophanes has used this characteristic in his work The Clouds, where he is ridiculing the famous tragic writer Socrates by representing him as a thief. The fourth characteristic is toilet humor. The picture on the screen may seem funny to some, but yes, this kind of repulsive representation was a part of the Greek comedy, where characters were seen vomiting and defecating to create comic effect. The last characteristic in the old comedy was political satire, where political satire was mainly helping to draw attention towards the drawbacks in the system. But such political satires were never direct. They were always done indirectly under the guise of buffoonery. And this characteristic feature has inspired many writers in the coming period. For example, in the Renaissance age, you can see this characteristic trait in the works of the Spanish writer Cervantes and also in the works of the French writer Francois Rabelais, who has written his work Gargantua and Pantagruel. Thereafter, in the 18th century, this can be noticed in the works of Jonathan Swift, who is well known for his work Gulliver's Travel. Also in the work of the French writer from the 18th century would be Voltaire, who is well known for his work Molière. Let us now shift our attention to the next period in Greek comedy, which was popularized by the works of Aeneas, that is, the Middle Comedy. In order to understand this period better, let us differentiate it with its precursor, that is, the Old Comedy. So far, we have understood that in Old Comedy, chorus played a vital role. The second chief aspect was that the public characters were personified, because these personified characters were eventually ridiculed in that play. If we compare these characteristics with the Middle Comedy, we will notice a vast difference, because in the Middle Comedy, the role of chorus was reduced, as it played no role in the plot. Also, the public characters were not personified. In fact, there were no political issues put in the forefront, because now the object of focus was mainly the general aspects. And that is what was being ridiculed on stage, the general and the literary aspect. So that itself shows us the vast contrast that was represented in the Middle Comedy. That brings us to the last period in Greek comedy, which is the New Comedy, that is particularly famous by the works of Menander. Let us begin with the characteristic traits in this period. If we notice the New Comedy, the very first significance that was paid in this period was that now the focus was mainly on the everyday life. That means the things that you were discussing were happening around you. The common day life situations, the social mishaps that can happen around you in your surrounding are the ones that you were mainly focusing on. The next characteristic feature was that you were discarding the grotesque. Grotesque here would mean the elements that were ugly. This ugly representation could be seen in the characteristics that were visible in the Old Comedy. Remember the toilet humor that was very repulsive, and the chorus, which was also very loud. The last and the final characteristic of New Comedy was that there was no attempt made to critique or improve the situation. So it was merely to just enjoy the things the way it were, based on the things that were there around you in your situations. You are no way trying to reform anybody. That concludes the very characteristic feature of the last comedy, which was the New Comedy in the Greek culture. How did the shift take place? And where did it take place immediately after the Greek comedy? That would be our next section. So, comedy now transferred from the Greek civilization to the Roman civilization. In here, you notice that the very first influence is seen in the works of Horace, who was very influenced by the works of Menander from the Greek civilization, and his works were considered to be very gentle. But what is interesting are the two famous writers of this time, which were Terence and Plautus. These were the two famous Roman dramatists of Roman comedy. So let's begin with the characteristics of Plautus that are dated from 205 to 184 BC. What you notice is that in his characteristics, he is also writing satire on public affairs, but he has a slight modification when it comes to that thing. That is, he is trying to modify the culture that was really followed in the Greek comedy. This can be seen in the second and third point, which is that there was more liberty and vitality in adaptations of the Greek works. That means they were more free and there was more energy and exuberance in them, because of which they felt a little different than their initial and original works. The second thing was that they were more simplified. That means the storyline was something that you can understand very well. You don't need any kind of modification or any of that sort because the initial works were very complex. But these works became very simple and easy to understand. The next characteristic is mainly dealing with the new elements that were incorporated in the works of Plautus. What are these? Let's begin with the very first one, that is stock motive. What do you mean by stock motive? The word stock is usually used to represent something very dull and something very boring, and it is usually represented in describing things that are very, very irrelevant. So, a stock motive here would be an activity that is completely irrelevant. In Roman comedy, this would be represented in situations where you notice that the characters are talking to each other. And in the middle of this, what you see is that a character, maybe a slave, is immediately coming in the middle of the stage and he's just running around left and right with loud movements just to create a comic effect. Similarly, there was also incorporation of short stock scenes. These stock scenes were actually incorporating characters exchanging insults and threats on each other. Then there were simple aspects included like witty expressions, coarse jokes, alliteration and pun, and loud humor. Let us now shift our attention to the next Roman dramatist, that is Terence, whose works are dated from 159 BC. What we notice in the work of Terence is that he is very refined and more modified in comparison to Plautus, because there are a lot of things that he is discarding in his writing style in context to the techniques that were used before. For example, there were no Roman elements. This is funny because being a Roman citizen, you're not writing anything about the place and the surroundings that you are a part of. The second aspect was that there was a natural conversation incorporated in the expression. That means it was almost like you are talking in a very well balanced form. The tone was very balanced here. The third aspect is that there was no boisterousness. That means there was no loudness in the activity and the actions that the characters were having in the representation of the play. The fourth element was that there was no farcical element. When I say farcical, I mainly mean the stock motives like the slaves running around. These farcical elements were not incorporated in the works of Terence. Then the work, because of this, was very refined and sophisticated. There was no incorporation of artificial things like unnatural monologues. The dialogues were very, very natural, very balanced, and there was no lyrical passage. So, if you look at it, it was not at all loud, it was very, very subtle, it was very, very balanced, and because of this, the Roman comedy during the time of Terence was very refined. But that's not the only way in which comedy was refined and modified, because there was, with the gradual passage of time, another kind of shift that was going to take place when these Roman comedies were going to influence another civilization in the coming eras. That is mainly to be seen in the 16th century, when the comedies of Roman writers influenced the dramatists in the English-speaking world. There are two chief pioneer writers of the Renaissance era who had provided a new kind of modification to the comic genre, and that is to be seen in the works of Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. What sort of modification did they give to the comedy? We would soon be coming to that point, but before that, let us understand which was the very first comic work to be written in England. This first work was also influenced by the Roman dramatists Plautus and Terence, and the name of this work is Ralph Roister Doister, which was written by Nicholas Udall, wherein in the story is mainly about a comic protagonist, Ralph, who attempts to court a widow who is already engaged to a merchant. Mister, I'm already engaged. The next early English comedy was written by William Stephenson and it's called Gammer Gurton's Needle, where the story revolves around a needle that belongs to a widow named Gammer, who loses the needle and eventually finds it in her servant's breeches. Lost, my needle is lost. The confusion in the play is created by a vagabond named Dickon. Now let us shift our attention to the two prominent writers of comedy during the Renaissance who had a very distinct style. The first to start the distinct style of his own was William Shakespeare, who introduced the romantic comedy to the English stage. This romantic comedy was developed on the model of Thomas Lodge's work, Rosalind. That is the source of inspiration for William Shakespeare's work called As You Like It. In the romantic comedy, the focus was mainly on the love affair that involved a beautiful heroine who was sometimes be disguised as a man. The course of love had many obstacles, and eventually all these obstacles were overcome to a happy ending. The other dramatist who introduced a new, distinct style of his own was Ben Jonson, who introduced the comedy of humours. In the comedy of humours, the focus was mainly on satire. The satire that is mainly trying to critique the evils that were represented on stage. To understand more about both these distinct styles, let us first begin with William Shakespeare and understand the characteristics of romantic comedy. The first characteristic feature of romantic comedy is romance and gaiety. That means lovers are eventually going to unite in the end. This can be seen with an example from the work Midsummer Night's Dream, where you notice that all the couples are able to overcome their difficulties and unite in the end. The second characteristic feature is amusing character and incidents, where you'll notice that this amusement or comedy is usually generated because of some confusion or misunderstanding. For example, in the play Midsummer Night's Dream, you can notice that the fairy queen Titania is declaring her love to a man with an ass head because she's under a spell. The next characteristic feature is the combination of romance and reality. This can be studied by the work The Merchant of Venice, where you notice that the romantic angle is represented by the couple Portia and Bassanio, where both of them have an affair and both of them also have a happy ending. Whereas the reality principle can be noticed by the punishment that is given to the Jew Shylock, who is not permitted to practice his profession and religion because he has been conspiring against the Christians. The fourth characteristic feature of Shakespeare's romantic comedy is that women have been projected as being superior to men. This can again be seen in the work The Merchant of Venice, where the Jew Shylock wants to claim the revenge by killing Antonio by demanding a pound of flesh, while Portia is also able to defend Antonio by using her wit and reason. A pound of flesh. Shed thou no blood, nor thou less nor more, but just a pound of flesh. The next characteristic feature is the mistaken identities. This is usually taking place when women are cross-dressing as men. In the work The Twelfth Night, you can notice that the female character, Viola, is mistaken for her brother Sebastian when in men's clothing. Similarly, Even her brother Sebastian is mistaken for another character, Cesario, by Sir Toby and Sir Andrew. The last characteristic feature of romantic comedy is the conflict of Apollonian and Dionysian values, where both the terms have been derived from the names of the Greek gods Apollo and Dionysus. Apollo represents the god of sun and Dionysus the god of wine and dance. Apollo is symbolic of rational thinking and order. Dionysus is symbolic of irrationality and chaos. So, why is this conflict important? Because this conflict was actually represented in the two different settings. Apollo was mainly representing the civilized culture, that is, the culture that was mainly taking place in the towns. And Dionysus mainly represented the environmental culture, or the culture that is followed in a forest area or in the wilderness. This characteristic feature can be studied in the work The Midsummer Night's Dream, where you notice that the inhabitants in the city of Athens follow order and are logical in their approach as they lead a disciplined life. However, when these citizens move to the woods or the forest, they are in a state of confusion and chaos. So, this is how the plot has a conflict between the Apollonian and Dionysian value till eventually the order is restored at the end. After understanding the characteristic features of romantic comedy, let us now understand the two classifications in which Shakespeare's romantic comedies can be classified. The very first classification is the early comedies in which Shakespeare wrote, and the latter one are known as the mature comedies that he wrote later on. What is distinct in the early comedies is that there is a lot of display of emotions. That means the lovers are not going to hesitate when they have to declare their love for each other. Whereas in the mature comedies, you would notice that there is more than the love for each other, the focus is mainly on their expression. So, this expression is mainly displaying the wit and the play of words, because more than their declaration for love, the focus is mainly on the intellectual repartee. What is interesting is that this mature comedy later gave way to another form of comedy, that was the comedy of manners in the Restoration period. That brings us to the concluding part of our lecture, that is the understanding of the comedy of humor by Ben Jonson. Now, from where did this concept really come from? You will be surprised to know that this concept of comedy of humor has actually come from an ancient medieval medical practice that stated that a body of human being is composed of four primary fluids. These include blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm. It is believed if any of these fluids is not there in the right proportion, the body will show side effects. These side effects can be noticed in the form of abnormal behaviors. For example, if you have too much of blood, you would have a sanguine behavior. That means you will have a lot of energy. You can be very, very happy. You can be very, very loud. That is the way a person would behave if there is too much of blood. Similarly, if there's too much of black bile, you would be very depressed. And that state is called melancholic, where you're very depressed and you do not want to do anything in your life. Your mood levels are very, very low. The third type is the yellow bile. If the yellow bile is in excess, you would be in a very, very negative energy. So you will have a very negative traits. You will feel like beating somebody, thrashing somebody very hard. And that state is called choleric. The last phase is when the excess is there in phlegm. If that is the case, you would feel very, very phlegmatic. That means you will be very lazy, your energy levels again will be low, and you will not feel like doing any kind of activity. So in Jonson's comedy of humor, each major character had a predominant humor that makes the character appear eccentric, crazy, or mad. Hence, the very first characteristics in comedy of humor is that humor is a dominant trait in his plays. You can notice this in his very well-known work, The Alchemist, where you notice an old man is overexcited and filled with the humor, sanguine, because he knows and believes that with the power of a powerful stone, he would be able to transform into a young man. I'm gonna be young soon. The next characteristic feature is that action is represented with the object to ridicule. This can again be seen in the work The Alchemist, where all the characters are believing in an old medieval practice of alchemy, which is about the power of a very old stone that is able to give vitality to the old and has the ability to convert any raw metal into gold. So, this is actually showing the old superstitious belief of the people in the 16th century that Ben Jonson is trying to ridicule through the action of belief in alchemy. The next characteristic feature again is the blend of realistic and satirical elements. This is mainly used to create humor in the plot structure by keeping the plot as realistic as possible. Finally, we come to the advantages and the disadvantages of Ben Jonson's humor technique. Let us begin with the advantages. The very first advantage was the removal of traditional clown. The second was the link between the present drama and classical drama. And the third was the emphasis on character and not the incident. The only disadvantage that the comedy of humor had was that the focus was only on one trait that was resulting in no growth of the character. So there is no evolution to be seen in the development of the character. It is almost like a constant loop in which the character is doing the same thing again and again. Now we come to the impact of the comedy of humor on the writers in the Restoration period. The writers to be most influenced by Ben Jonson's style of humor were William Wycherley and George Etheridge. That brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. Do subscribe if you are new to this channel and like it if you feel the lecture was informative. See you next time. Bye-bye.